So I was reading 1 Samuel 12 this morning, and I was kind of confused. I had to look it up because Saul has been king just 1 year, and he has to go up against the Philistines, the arch enemies, and with this man, and then they're getting beaten by the Philistines, and Samuel tells him to wait 7 days for him, Samuel will offer sacrifices. Well, 7 days went by and everyone was hiding in caves and no sight of Samuel, and so Saul takes it upon himself to offer the sacrifice. And just then, as he finishes, Samuel arrives and he scolds Saul, and actually at that time already he tells him that God will give the kingdom to a man after his own heart, meaning David. I always thought Saul's kingdom was taken later from him when he made so many other mistakes. So I was wondering, when should we wait for God and when should we move forward? Because when I was still in Los Angeles, I attended the church Mosaic of Erwin McManus. I'm not a fan of him, but he wrote books and he often lectured on Jonathan, Saul's son. And Jonathan was with David, and Jonathan was always doing God's will. But one time Jonathan and his friend went up against the Philistines again at night, and they said, should we go forward? Is it God's plan or not? And then one of them says, Jonathan says, well, if it's not God's plan, he will hinder us, but if it is, we can just move forward. And they did and had great exploits and was successful. So contrast that to Saul, who also did something on his own, and David many times later on, such as eating the showbread, did things that were actually forbidden, but God didn't hold it against him. So, but with Saul in Samuel 12, he doesn't wait on God, and God had commanded him to wait. That's the problem. But sometimes it's very hard to know when does God tell us if we can move forward, like Jonathan boldly moving forward without given explicit instruction by God? And when do we have to wait? Of course, Samuel did say wait. And these days, after Christ has come, there is no intermediary. So lest anyone waits on any other person, we don't have any intermediary other than Christ between us and God, the way it was in the Old Testament. So that would be a recipe for cult indoctrination if we wait on a prophet who tells us something. We really have to wait and listen to God's voice for when to move forward. But then I also was just thinking that perhaps Saul and David are a variation of Abel and Cain, because God reads their hearts. They both were making sacrifices, but one didn't do it with the right heart. He didn't do Cain. And then he was very angry and wrought against God, and God told him he needs to tame and master his emotions instead of his emotions mastering him. Well, I have a lot of problems, and probably most of us, mastering our emotions. So that's a sign that reminds us of Cain's conduct. But also Saul and David often did things on his own boldly. And of course he was very much reprimanded by God, such as with Bathsheba. But other times when he went into battle, he often did things such as eating the showbread, which was forbidden, but he did it and God didn't hold it against him. So it's this kind of balance. When do we have to wait for God? When do we have to move forward? And when can we perhaps move forward, even if it's not completely the right thing, but our heart is right? There were many situations in my life where I hesitated or was even almost paralyzed for a certain time. And I'm still not quite sure if it was a time of just waiting. So what's the purpose of waiting? Because it's in stark contrast to the New Age approaches that rely on ourselves as God. And I'm not saying that God doesn't speak to us. Of course he does, into our inner person, inner mind, inner woman, inner man. But the New Age, in a sense, takes things into their own hearts, into their own minds, in their own hands, and moves forward using some of the principles of the Bible, because the New Age really uses principles of the Bible, such as visualization, which is all over the Bible. Think of even Jacob and his uncle Laban. And Laban said, oh, all the spotted cattle will belong to him, and all the non-spotted, the striped, to Jacob. So Jacob takes sticks and cuts stripes in them and puts those in front of the watering holes of the animals. And so they see the stripes every day, and so their offspring is all striped. And so Jacob gets all the cattle because he gets the striped one. So there's a principle of visualization and meditation on what's desired. I don't know what would be. So I think it's throwing the baby out with the bath water when we say we shouldn't do visualization or some of those practices that the New Age, in a sense, has co-opted, adapted, stolen almost from the Bible. But the one thing that the New Age hasn't taken from the Bible is this principle of waiting on God. And it's very difficult sometimes. It really has to do with his sheep know his voice. Sometimes in the New Age we of course only listen to our own voice, and I told our own voices, the inner light, the inner guidance, the divine, versus Christianity says to also listen to God's voice. And sometimes God's voice says to wait when we want to move forward, even when it seems like a godly thing, because when Saul offers sacrifices, it's sacrifices to God. He doesn't, have a festivity with wine, dance and song and, have a good time. In fact, he tries to honor God, but in a way that's not godly. So, have you had times when you waited on God and didn't know, should you move forward? Have you had times where it was the right thing retrospectively? I'm interested in this topic. We're here in Pembroke Pines, which has beautiful gardens and homes. And I always love walking in different places with my dog, Moki. And so I thought I'd talk a little bit about some of the things about waiting on God and when it's the right time, and how do we know if it's the right time, or when are we procrastinating, or when is something holding us back that shouldn't hold us back, some kind of action or addiction or something, or even other people that hold us back.